Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln, by Doris Kearns Goodwin. Introduction. Imagine a building, brand new, thrown together in just a few weeks from raw lumber. It's May, 1860, in the young, booming city of Chicago. The air is electric. Inside this wooden hall, nicknamed the Wigwam, the future of a nation hangs in the balance. The brand new Republican Party is about to choose its candidate for President of the United States, a man who will have to face a country tearing itself apart over the issue of slavery. The choice seems obvious. The man of the hour is William Henry Seward, a celebrated senator from New York. He's brilliant, experienced, and has the most powerful political boss in the country, Thurlow Weed, running his campaign. The champagne is already on ice in his hometown of Auburn, New York, where cannons are waiting to fire in celebration of his victory. Also in the running are Salmon P. Chase, the formidable governor of Ohio, a man of immense ambition and staunch anti-slavery principles, and Edward Bates, a respected elder statesman from Missouri, seen as a safe, conservative choice to calm a fractured nation. And then there's the fourth man. A lanky lawyer from Springfield, Illinois. A man who has served only a single, undistinguished term in Congress a dozen years earlier. A man who has lost 2 recent Senate races. A man whose name, outside of his home state, is barely known. Abraham Lincoln. His own friends in Illinois know he's a dark horse. His chances are slim to none. As Lincoln waits for news back in Springfield, pacing nervously between his law office and the telegraph station, he knows it too. He tells a friend that if Seward isn't nominated on the first ballot, the prize will surely go to Chase or Bates. He doesn't even consider himself a real contender. What happens next is one of the greatest upsets in American political history. It's a story that reveals the hidden genius of this quiet man from the prairie. And it's the beginning of a lesson in leadership that is more relevant today than ever before. My name is not important. Think of me as a guide, a storyteller who has spent a lifetime studying the giants of history. And today, I want to share with you the wisdom found within the pages of a truly remarkable book, Team of Rivals, The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln by the brilliant historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. This isn't just a summary of a history book. By the end of our time together, I promise you will understand a profound secret about power, about leadership, and about the human heart. You will discover how a man who was consistently underestimated, who faced ridicule, failure, and unimaginable personal tragedy, was able to unite his fiercest competitors, inspire a divided nation, and guide it through its darkest hour. This is the story of how Abraham Lincoln, with nothing but his character and his wisdom, forged a team of rivals into a cabinet of allies, and in doing so, saved the United States of America. It's a story that will not only fascinate you, it just might change the way you think about your own ambitions, your own challenges, and your own capacity for greatness. Book summary. Our story truly begins not on the battlefields of the Civil War, but in the months leading up to that chaotic presidential convention in 1860. The 4 men vying for the Republican nomination, Abraham Lincoln, William Seward, Salmon Chase, and Edward Bates, were, in many ways, products of the same American dream. They were all ambitious men who had a longing to rise, as the French observer Alexis de Tocqueville noted was so common in this young nation. They were all lawyers, all gifted speakers, and all had come to believe that the institution of slavery must not be allowed to expand into the new Western territories. But that is where the similarities ended. William Henry Seward was the man to beat. Born into a privileged New York family, he was educated, worldly, and had served as both governor and senator of the most powerful state in the Union. He was the face of the new Republican Party. When he spoke, the nation listened. His speeches were filled with ringing phrases like the irrepressible conflict between slavery and freedom, words that became the battle cries for the anti-slavery movement. He was so confident of his victory that he had already drafted the speech he would give to the Senate upon resigning his seat to accept the nomination. Salmon P. Chase of Ohio was a man of immense stature and even greater ambition. Deeply religious and fiercely principled, he had dedicated his legal career to defending fugitive slaves, earning the title Attorney General for the Negro. He saw the presidency not just as a political prize, but as a moral destiny. He truly believed that the country owed it to him to make him president. Living in a majestic Gothic mansion in Columbus with his beautiful and equally ambitious daughter, Kate, he waited for the nomination he felt he had rightfully earned. Edward Bates of Missouri was the elder statesman, a respected judge who had been a political figure since the 1820s. He had largely retired from public life, content with his large family and his country estate. But a powerful political family, the Blairs, saw him as the perfect conservative candidate, a former slaveholder who had freed his own slaves, a man from a border state who could unite the fractured pieces of the country. Though reluctant at first, the mania, as his friends called it, soon bit him, and he allowed himself to dream of the White House. And then there was Lincoln. Compared to these men, he was a nobody. Born in a log cabin, with less than a year of formal schooling, he was a self-made man in the truest sense. While Seward, Chase, and Bates came from comfortable, if not wealthy, backgrounds, Lincoln's childhood was one of grinding poverty and deep personal loss. His mother, Nancy Hanks, a woman he later said he owed everything to, died when he was just 9 years old. He lost his sister a decade later. This early intimacy with sorrow forged in him a profound empathy, a deep understanding of human suffering that would become one of his greatest strengths as a leader. His ambition was forged in the fire of these hardships. From a young age, he had an insatiable hunger for knowledge, reading every book he could get his hands on by the light of the fireplace. He filled scrapbooks with passages of poetry and prose, memorizing them until their rhythms became a part of him. He was a natural storyteller, a gift inherited from his father, and he learned early on how to capture an audience, whether it was a group of friends around a campfire or a jury in a courtroom. He arrived in Springfield, Illinois, as a young man with all his possessions and a pair of saddlebags. It was there that he built his law practice, made a name for himself in Illinois politics, and married Mary Todd, a spirited and intelligent woman from a prominent Kentucky family. It was also there that he developed a circle of fiercely loyal friends who, at that very moment in Chicago, were moving heaven and earth to get him nominated. Lincoln's strategy was simple and brilliant. He knew he was nobody's first choice. So he aimed to be everybody's second choice. He instructed his team in Chicago to give no offense to others, leave them in a mood to come to us, if they shall be compelled to give up their first love. And that's exactly what happened. Seward, the frontrunner, had too many enemies. His radical speeches on slavery frightened the more conservative states like Pennsylvania and Indiana, states the Republicans had to win to beat the Democrats. Chase was seen as too rigid, too self-righteous, and he couldn't even unite his own delegation from Ohio. Bates was too conservative for the more passionate anti-slavery delegates. As the convention balloted, Seward's lead began to shrink. The other candidates stalled. And Lincoln's team, led by the shrewd and tireless Judge David Davis, went to work. They made deals. They made promises. They argued that Lincoln was the only one who could carry the critical battleground states. They packed the convention hall with thousands of Lincoln supporters whose thunderous applause for their man created an unstoppable wave of momentum. On the third ballot, to the astonishment of the nation, Abraham Lincoln became the Republican nominee for president. Seward was devastated. The news reached him in his garden, and he turned as pale as ashes. Chase was humiliated, blaming his defeat on the disloyalty of his own state. Bates accepted the loss with quiet dignity, But he, too, was surprised and disappointed. None of them could truly comprehend how this fourth-rate lecturer, this prairie lawyer, had beaten them. And then, Lincoln did something that no one in American history had ever done before. He invited his rivals to join his cabinet. This decision is the heart of Goodwin's book, and it is the key to understanding Lincoln's genius. A lesser man would have surrounded himself with loyal supporters. A man insecure in his own abilities would never have brought such powerful, ambitious men who believed they were better suited for the presidency, into his inner circle. But Lincoln was different. He knew that the country was facing its greatest crisis. The Southern states were beginning to secede from the Union. The threat of civil war was no longer a distant possibility, it was a terrifying certainty. And Lincoln knew he needed the strongest, most capable men in the nation by his side, whether they were his friends or not. He offered William Seward, his greatest rival, the most prestigious post, Secretary of State. He offered Salmon Chase, the man whose ambition was a constant threat, control of the nation's finances as Secretary of the Treasury. And he made Edward Bates the nation's top lawyer, the Attorney General. He also brought in 3 former Democrats to round out his cabinet: Gideon Welles as Secretary of the Navy, Montgomery Blair as Postmaster General, and, eventually, the fiery and brilliant Edwin M. Stanton as his Secretary of War. Every one of these men was better known, better educated, and more experienced in public life than Lincoln. In the beginning, they looked down on him. Seward secretly planned to run the presidency himself, to relegate Lincoln to a mere figurehead. Stanton had once met Lincoln years earlier in a court case and had treated him with utter contempt, calling him a long-armed ape. Chase never stopped believing he was the man who should be president and would spend the next 4 years scheming to make it so. But Lincoln, through an extraordinary combination of political skill, emotional intelligence, and profound humanity, won them over. He became the undisputed master of his team of rivals. How did he do it? First, he listened. In cabinet meetings, he would let everyone have their say. He encouraged debate and dissent. He knew that by hearing all sides of an issue, he could arrive at the best possible decision. He didn't need to be the smartest man in the room, he needed to be the wisest. Second, he knew how to manage egos. He understood the burning ambition of men like Seward and Chase. He gave them responsibility. He praised their successes and shared credit with them. And when their rivalries threatened to tear the cabinet apart, he found ways to soothe their injured feelings and remind them of their common purpose. When Seward, in a moment of arrogance early in the administration, sent Lincoln a memo essentially telling him how to be president and offering to take over, Lincoln could have dismissed him on the spot. Instead, he wrote a firm but private reply, making it clear who was in charge. I remarked that if this must be done, I must do it. He put Seward in his place without humiliating him, and in doing so, he began the process of turning a rival into a loyal friend. Third, he led with kindness and empathy. Lincoln possessed a remarkable ability to see the world from another person's point of view. This wasn't a political tactic, it was the core of his character. He had known hardship, and it had made him compassionate. He wrote thousands of letters to ordinary citizens, to mothers who had lost their sons in the war, to soldiers who had been sentenced to death for falling asleep on watch. He would often say he didn't want to shoot a simple-minded soldier boy who deserts, while the wily agitator who induces him to desert went unpunished. This deep well of empathy allowed him to connect with people on a human level, to inspire a profound sense of loyalty. His cabinet, though often at odds with each other, came to be fiercely loyal to him. Fourth, he used humor and storytelling as tools of leadership. When cabinet meetings became too tense, when the pressure of the war seemed unbearable, Lincoln would lean back in his chair and tell a story. His rivals were often frustrated by this. Stanton, his intense Secretary of War, couldn't understand how the president could tell jokes when the fate of the nation was at stake. But Lincoln knew that humor was a way to diffuse tension, to make a point without being preachy, and to remind everyone of their shared humanity. His stories were often simple, drawn from his life in the West, but they almost always contained a kernel of wisdom that cut to the heart of the matter. And finally, he shouldered the blame. In a world of politicians eager to take credit and avoid responsibility, Lincoln was different. When a military campaign failed, he didn't blame his generals. When a policy decision was criticized, he didn't point fingers at his cabinet. "I am the president," he would say, "the responsibility is mine." This willingness to accept responsibility, this profound humility, was perhaps his greatest strength. It earned him the unwavering respect of the men who served under him. Edwin Stanton, the man who had once mocked him, came to love and revere him. On the night Lincoln was assassinated, as the president lay dying, it was Stanton who took control, managing the chaos with an iron will. And when Lincoln drew his last breath, it was Stanton who, through his tears, spoke the immortal words, "Now he belongs to the ages." Throughout the long and bloody years of the war, this team of rivals, under Lincoln's quiet and steady guidance, accomplished extraordinary things. Seward, as Secretary of State, became Lincoln's closest friend and most trusted advisor. His diplomatic skill was crucial in preventing Great Britain and France from recognizing the Confederacy, a move that could have been fatal to the Union cause. He and Lincoln would often spend their evenings together at Seward's house, relaxing by the fire, the president finding a much-needed escape from the crushing burdens of his office. Chase, as Secretary of the Treasury, was a financial genius. He managed to fund the massive war effort, creating a national banking system and issuing the nation's first paper currency, the greenbacks, that we still know today. Though he never gave up his presidential ambitions and caused Lincoln no end of trouble, Lincoln recognized his immense talent and kept him in the cabinet for as long as he could. In an ultimate act of magnanimity, after Chase had resigned, Lincoln appointed him Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the position he had long desired. Stanton, the Mars of the cabinet, was a force of nature. He brought order to the chaotic War Department, tirelessly working 15-hour days to equip and supply the vast Union armies. He was often irascible, impatient, and difficult, but his ferocious energy and absolute devotion to the Union cause were indispensable. The story of Lincoln and his team of rivals is more than just a history of the Civil War. It is a timeless lesson in the art of leadership. It teaches us that true strength lies not in surrounding ourselves with those who agree with us, but in harnessing the talents of those who challenge us. It shows us that empathy, humility, and kindness are not signs of weakness, but are, in fact, powerful tools of persuasion. And it reminds us that out of division, a wise and patient leader can forge a lasting unity. In the final weeks of the war, Lincoln delivered his second inaugural address, one of the most beautiful and profound speeches ever written. He didn't gloat over the North's impending victory. Instead, he spoke of healing. "With malice toward none, with charity for all," he said, "let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds." This was the essence of his leadership. In a time of unimaginable hatred and division, he chose reconciliation over retribution. He chose charity over malice. And in doing so, he not only saved the Union, but he also defined the very best of what America could be. Commentary. When you close the final page of Team of Rivals, you are left with a feeling of profound awe. Doris Kearns Goodwin has done more than just write a history of the Civil War. She has painted an intimate portrait of leadership in its most challenging form. The most powerful lesson from this book isn't about military strategy or political maneuvering. It's about character. It's about the incredible power of a single individual's humanity to shape the course of history. What strikes me most, and what I hope strikes you as you stand on the threshold of your own life's journey, is Lincoln's profound self-confidence, a confidence born not of arrogance, but of humility. Think about it. Here was a man who knew he was not the most educated, the most experienced, or the most polished person in the room. And yet, he had the wisdom to recognize that he didn't need to be. He just needed to be the one who could bring out the best in everyone else. He wasn't afraid of being challenged. He wasn't afraid of being wrong. He was only afraid of failing the great task that had been entrusted to him. In our world today, we often see leadership as a competition. We think of leaders as those who shout the loudest, who are the most certain, who never admit doubt. Lincoln shows us a different way. He teaches us that leadership is about listening, about learning, about admitting when you've made a mistake and sharing credit when things go right. It's about having the strength to be gentle, the courage to be kind, and the wisdom to know that you don't have all the answers. So, how can you, a young person with your own ambitions and dreams, apply these lessons to your own life? It's simpler than you might think. First, build your own team of rivals. When you're working on a school project, don't just pick your best friends. Seek out the person who thinks differently, the one who always challenges your ideas. Listen to them. Debate with them. You'll find that their perspective makes your final product stronger, just as Seward's caution tempered Lincoln's resolve, and Stanton's fire fueled his determination. Second, practice empathy. The next time you're in a disagreement with a friend or a family member, take a moment to truly try to see the world from their perspective. Don't just wait for your turn to talk, listen to understand. Lincoln's ability to understand the fears and motivations of his opponents, and even his enemies, was one of his most powerful tools. It allowed him to find common ground where others saw only division. And third, lead with humility. Don't be afraid to say, "I don't know," or "I made a mistake." Take responsibility for your failures and share the credit for your successes. You'll find that people are far more willing to follow someone who is honest about their own imperfections than someone who pretends to be perfect. Lincoln's story is the ultimate American story. It is the story of a man who rose from the humblest of beginnings to the highest office in the land, not through wealth or privilege, but through the sheer force of his character. He was, as one of his secretaries said, the best of us. His life is a testament to the idea that with patience, with wisdom, and with a heart full of charity for all, one person can indeed change the world. That was a summary of Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. We've journeyed through the core of its powerful message today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you explore the territory yourself. The true magic of this book is not just in the grand sweep of history, but in the small, quiet moments, a turn of phrase in a letter, a story told by a fireplace, a moment of doubt or a flash of insight. This summary is designed to be a starting point, to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, if you felt a connection to this quiet man from Illinois and his extraordinary team, then I urge you to grab a copy. Reading this book isn't just an act of learning, it's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see leadership, history, and the enduring power of the human spirit. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, if it gave you something to think about, I'd be grateful if you'd hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's continue to learn and grow together.